All right. Good morning and welcome to an emergency episode. I really need to get like siren sound effects and stuff for these emergency podcasts cuz I think they're my favorite ones just cuz they just happen based on what's going on in the league. So, emergency podcast this morning at 9:08 Central Time. Muskegon Muskrats headquarters and the chili cheese fries headquarters were up very late last night. Uh, Talks going into the 5 a.m. hour, perhaps. I might be exaggerating a little bit. I only saw it at 2 a.m., but there were certainly moves happening afterwards. But we are here with the Muskegon Mahomeses. I think we might see a different branding change perhaps after this year. You never know. Let's talk to GM Alex Morales here about the big trade. Alex, on the bottom of the screen, I have the details of the trade, but I want to hear your initial thoughts on such a big deal as we enter week 5 of the season.
Yeah, so before we get to that, I actually wanted to share a little bit of a story, which I find ironic now because I thought about it this morning. Um, so that particular draft, where Tips got Mahomes, that's when we hadn't transitioned over to the supplemental draft, and that was the year that we were all still in Raymond James Stadium, watching the NFL draft, and um, we were submitting our picks on who we wanted first because we weren't doing like a draft order, like, based on last year's draft order. So I remember Tibbs and I kind of like going back and forth on who submitted their entry for Patrick Mahomes first. And we were fighting about that. And then I decided, hey, I didn't want to make it a bigger thing. I'm just going to let him have Patrick Mahomes and I'll settle with Mitch Trubisky. Boy, was that a mistake. So I find it funny that, after all this time, and I think about that, like, man, I could have had Mahomes, and I didn't, I didn't get him, and I let him have it, and what a mistake. And I feel like he's home now. He is Mahomes. He's Mahomes in my Mahomes. So pretty interesting. But yeah. Anyway, to your question, um, yeah, we felt like this was the time. I was looking at my quarterback situation. Obviously, the tight end situation has been abysmal, for everyone, for the most part, if you don't have one of the top 3 tight ends. So those were my 2 glaring needs. And I knew if I was going to make a trade of this magnitude, I was going to need to get quality players that I knew that I could start every week. Didn't matter what the matchups were, lead them in, and then not have to worry about it. And having to do the start sit carousel at those positions is a real pain in the ass. So I was like, you know what, we're just gonna get top notch players, we're gonna put them in there and then let it ride, and it worked out. So I'm pretty excited about it.
So you definitely got some top-notch players at the position. Obviously, let's start with each one of the players that's involved in this trade, and there, just for the listeners out there, there is a plan. We were trying to get Tibbs on this morning, but he's a little bit busy, so we'll try to get his comment on the big trade. Either whether it be in Discord or something else, maybe another podcast. But let's go through each of the players involved in the trade. Um, for me, Patrick Mahomes, he's QB 10 this year so far. I guess my first question is why now as opposed to other times of the year to make this trade? Like, why not do this trade, before the season started? Um, I from a Mahomes standpoint, could you call this like a down Mahomes year so far for the 3-4 weeks that we've seen? Because he's QB 10. He had the last game he played was a stinker. It was 15 points, 31 points, 26, 23. Like, it's not exactly what we're used to seeing. His receivers, frankly, haven't really ever been worse. Um, are you scared at all about his like current situation? Or do you think he's going to bounce up into that top 3 again?
No, I going into beginning of last season, when they lost Tyreek Hill, I was one of those first people that were like, "Oh, Mahomes, he's going to take a huge step back. Like, he's not going to be the same." And there was times where the Chiefs kind of looked a little slow to start the season, and then they just picked it up. and then it was just lights out the rest of the season. And if there's one guy you don't want to count out, regardless of who he's throwing to, just based off the talent alone, like I think Patrick Mahomes is that guy. You can, with a very very little argument you can give that it's not him, that he's not the dude that you need um, to essentially get you where you need to get it win, regardless of how his everything around him looks. Like he just gets it done. Like he was doing it in the all those playoff runs where the Chiefs are down by like 2 or 3 touchdowns, and then he just decides that he wants to put it on in the second half, and you know it's Patrick Mahomes, and I can go to sleep knowing that he'll have better days, and he will. So
Yeah, and Patrick Mahomes, he's 28 in the prime of his career right now. Um, Durability, he's always been very durable, so you don't really have to worry about any crazy injury histories like guys like Robert Griffin or some of these other running quarterbacks. He stays healthy, averaging 20 points a game this year. We'll see how that continues. Like you said, I do think there are some brighter days ahead, and I think once the Chiefs kind of figure out what they're doing with the receiver room, they're going to come up as opposed to going down. They can't really get any worse from a receiver standpoint. So we'll see what happens there. The other piece of this trade, I frankly think this could end up being one of the unsung pieces of the trade, is Sam Laporta here. Sam Laporta, I talked about on the last podcast a little bit, but I had a tough decision to make between him and Mayer. I believed in both of the talents, but Laporta just has that dog in him, and I just love the fact that he ends up with the ultimate dog himself, the PC principal, the Dan Campbell, and it's just a match made in heaven. And he's another guy, 22 years old. He's tight end 4 right now in his rookie season. That hardly ever happens. And now he goes to your squad that, frankly, you haven't had a tight end in a hot minute. So what are your thoughts on Laporta, and do you think he's in the top 3 of dynasty tight ends right now?
I mean, yeah, it's hard to imagine that he's not, and as far as dynasty rankings go, redraft, I think he's still easily top 7 at that rate. Yeah, I mean, he's the kind of guy that I want in my per se locker room. I have Puka Nacua, who also is just, he does what he needs to do. Like, he's not doing anything fancy. There was a podcast I had watched with Steve Smith. I don't remember the name of it.
The one with Underworld,
they were
Underdog.
Yeah, it might have been that. And he was talking about how, like, when Puka gets the ball, he's not dancing around trying to get more yards. He just gets the ball and he just goes forward. That's it. He just does his job. He doesn't give a fuck. Or sorry, I'm not supposed to on YouTube.
They're gonna come for you.
But we'll edit that later. He just doesn't care. Like, he just does his job. And Laporta is like one of those guys that I can admire and appreciate with that same kind of mentality. Like, he just does what he needs to do, and he doesn't try to do more, than what his job is, designated for. And he looks good. He looks great, and
he's awesome after the catch.
Yes, and living in Michigan now I have someone I can actually root for in the Lions that I don't feel like is going to fizzle out, or, in a short period of time. So I'm pretty excited about having him to the squad.
You can get a Laporta jersey now. You get a Lions jersey. I would buy a Lions jersey if I lived in Michigan. Why not? Support the cause. They're so bad usually.
It's a toss-up between him and Nacua now, so we'll see.
No. This isn't a Puka Nacua podcast. There's a whole nother 45-minute podcast.
We don't have time for that another day.
That's a whole other thing. All right, so let's talk about the other side of the trade now. You give away some serious talent here, to get serious talent, but how do you feel about your team's overall depth right now? Because you gave away, I would argue top dynasty pieces at the two positions, running back and receiver. Kyler, we'll talk about Kyler in a second, but Breece Hall and Jalen Waddle going back. Hall obviously hasn't had like the most crazy start to the year, with the Jets being just kind of garbage without Aaron Rodgers, and then Jalen Waddle not as involved this year as previous years. But how do you think this affects your depth, and do you think you're going to be in a good spot once it comes to playoff time?
Yeah, so Obviously, I took into account like where my team was, where it is now, where it was at the start of the season. I didn't have a Puka Nakua to start the season. I didn't have DeAndre Swift, playing where I felt like he could get to. But obviously, there's a lot of people that felt otherwise because of his injury history, which well, that's another conversation for another day. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Um, if Swift's not playing really well and I don't have Nakua, this trade doesn't happen because I can't afford to lose those pieces.
Right.
But week one I bench Hall because like I don't know what his usage is, and he has that big run and that week one, and then he kind of just doesn't really do much. These last 3 weeks. So I'm looking where my team is at, and the points I'm putting up, and I mentioned before in the group chat how I'm leaving points on the bench because I'm trying to figure out who to start sit. Um, Instead of me having to fiddle around with my lineup so much, worrying about who I'm going to sit and why or and whatever the case, now I can just feel more comfortable. Like, here, these are my best players. These are the guys I just need to keep in. Whatever the hearsay is about, their usage, whatever the case, I don't have to worry about that now. I feel really good about Swift the rest of the way. Same thing with Nakua. And, you know, with Waddle in particular, he was always like that 1B receiver that he was considered. Same thing with T. Higgins, and I have two of those guys. And now, if you want to throw Nakua into that conversation with Cooper Cup back, I don't need three 1B wide receivers on my roster. You know, it's a lot of like, well, if they were on their own and they were the number one guy, they would be a different story. They'd have more fantasy value. That's fine. So, between that and
You got
um,
Higgins too. He's another one B. Did you say the Higgins?
yeah, I mentioned Higgins,
Mm.
and between Wall and Higgins, I don't know if you've owned them in the past, but it can be a little frustrating at times because they're the kind of guys that will randomly miss like a half of football, or they'll miss one game here or one game there. And it got to the point where I don't need two of those guys as my starting wide receivers. I can deal with one. And then, with like a Higgins, like, okay, I got my rib injury, and then like I explode for 2 touchdowns, and then I'm out for this, and then I'm back, and I'm out. Like, it's just too frustrating and too inconsistent to have two guys like that. So, instead of having Waddle and Higgins, I'll just shut off Waddle and hope for Higgins to finally get that 1A kind of production, whether it's in Cincinnati or somewhere else. So that's what I'm banking on.
Nice, yeah, and I think for Kyler Murray, his situation is so uh, we just don't know. We have no idea of what we're gonna get with Kyler Murray over the next 2 years per se. With the contract situation, frankly, the Cardinals really aren't looking all that bad with Josh Dobbs right now, which I've noticed this happening recently. Like these quarterbacks that like historically have not been good, like a Geno Smith or a Josh Dobbs or even a Baker Mayfield for that example. Um, they're just coming out of nowhere now and playing like good football, which I don't feel like happened that much in recent years for some reason. Like I feel like whenever you had these like bad quarterbacks, they just stayed bad. And right now there seems to be a renaissance of players revitalizing their career. I'm not so sure that Kyler's gonna be around next year in Arizona. Like obviously his contract situation is so wild, but I'm just not sure if he's gonna end up even staying there. So, did you view Kyler as kind of like a throw in this deal per se? Like which seems crazy to say because I was the smart guy to take him 2 overall in Galactic a couple of years ago. But a throw in Kyler Murray, is that what's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what happened with our trade to finally uh, push it through on my end. I traded for Kyler Murray last year and traded away Trevor Lawrence to get him, thinking that he was going to be the catalyst I needed to get me through the postseason. And he was playing well. There, if you look back at the last year, um, you know, either he didn't have Hopkins or he didn't have uh, Brown to throw to at the same time. And I feel like if he had and he was healthy, that Cardinals offense would have been completely different. But that's the past. Obviously, things didn't work out. Um, but I haven't really had to play with him at all, and my team is like hung in there. I'm not going to say that I've been world beating everybody, but my team has been competitive without his services. So me getting using him as the last trade piece, it just didn't really matter at this point. Like, yeah, I can worry about, oh, what did I have to do to give up to for this guy, and what I trade up to get that guy. But at the end of the day, if they're not putting up points on my team, what difference does it make? And if I can use that to get someone that is going to put up points or should be, as like a Patrick Mahomes, of course, why not? Like, I can't worry about what I did or the mistakes I made before. I just have to keep moving forward and try to get better. So that was the
Yeah.
idea.
No, that makes total sense. And we definitely talked about Waddle. We talked about Murray. So let's just talk about Brees Hall real quick. Hall with the kind of an odd situation this year. For everybody knows the talent is there. Do you think you might regret giving up Hall as you kind of just you really don't have any picks coming up, and getting young running backs with talent is a tough thing to do in this league. Are you feeling like, obviously right now you're happy to have Patrick and Sam Laporta, but do you think you might regret giving up Hall?
Well, I mean, it really just comes down to if Mahomes keeps being Mahomes and Laporta just plays well. Like, and with my other running backs, um, between Harris and Stevenson, they're kind of on the down right now. But I can't imagine that it's going to stay like that permanently. Um, Harris, their team hasn't been great on the offensive line, and I feel like that's where he makes his money is being that guy that gets all those nice touches, on the goal line.
Najee Harris.
Coming back and playing, playing like we were expecting them to, even if they're just mid RB2s at this point, I'll take that. It really depends on how well my team does. Like, I totally expect Hall to be perfectly fine. He's going to be a great fantasy running back. If not this year, then definitely next. Depending on if Rodgers ever comes back and if he ever plays the same way. But, I think, as long as Mahomes and Laporta hold up, like it won't make a difference. Like, the points I lose from him, I'm just going to make up with those guys. And then as long as my running backs hold up, they're all in their mid 20s right now. I at least got a few years with them, minimum. So by the time I have to worry about, getting my draft picks back finally, I'll be able to, eventually start working on getting the replacements down the road.
Yeah, getting those retools. All right, so last question. This is gonna be a little short, quick hitter podcast, but let's see from a grand scheme of things here. Where do the Muskegon Muskrats rank in the power rankings right now? What would you put yourself?
Ooh.
It's a tough question, but
So
I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yeah, this season's been a little wild. Compare most, and it's kind of been like everyone's been beating each other up, so we're all pretty like kind of close. Obviously you and Scavelli had, at 4-0, but everyone's just kind of beating each other. So where I feel like I was more closer to 5 or 6, I'd say I would probably move myself up a couple of notches, maybe to like 4 right now with Mahomes. And I think Mahomes we're going to be seeing his best football coming pretty soon. I think Sean alluded to that as well. I was looking at the schedule, and it's besides just the weeks where we have our playoffs, like just the rest of his schedule looks pretty soft. So I'm looking forward to seeing Mahomes, play some chuck 'em football, these next several weeks.
Well, what's interesting too is you make this trade, and you're playing the Cheese Fries this week in an ultimate revenge game right out the gate. I mean, you got to go against your guys immediately, and the Cheese Fries have a 43-point performance from DJ Moore just out of nowhere off the top rope. DJ Moore's been good this year, man. It's crazy. It'd be, I saw something funny that it was the Panthers put out some like comment saying, "Oh, we're looking for a number 1 receiver," and it's like, but you traded DJ Moore. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Oh man. All right, so that we'll just wrap it up for this one. We're about 20 minutes is perfect. So any parting words as you enter the world of Patrick Mahomes? Hold on a second. We got a comment here. Hold on. This looks like it's from Vince. Alex, if you are fourth, who are the 3 teams ahead of you?
Yeah.
Obviously, the Armadillos.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. So, I think I think we have to give you more credit than where we had you ranked to start of the season because I mean your record speaks for itself. I don't know if that's sustainable,
It's not.
if we're being
I'll tell you right
honest.
now, it's not.
But hey, you know what? You're 4-0. You take your, you take
I'll
your
take my
victory
8th
lap.
place in the power rankings. I'm okay with that.
So, I think with Mahomes, uh, right now, I still feel like Vince's team is still better. Dan's team, even with his lack of running backs, if those wide receivers are keeping up that pace, it's going to be hard to beat him. If two of those three guys, two of those three wide receivers go off on any particular week. And James's team, I think those are like the 3 teams. I think Scavelli's, close, but I think if if Justin Fields can play like he did this Thursday and continue that the rest of the season, then obviously I think I'd sit behind Scavelli. But I think Scavelli and I are really close right now, even though our records obviously don't indicate that. But I'm just waiting for my guys that kind of had slow starts to pick it up, and I expect that to be the case, as these weeks go on. So we'll see what happens. But we're feeling pretty good about the second half of the season.
Well, you get the cheese fries this week, obviously, and next week you get a tough task in playing the Philadelphia Plague. So I think it'll be a good test to your ranking there. So, all right, let's wrap this up. We had quite a few people we had 6 people watching this at one point. So between you and I, then we have 8 out of 10 people involved in the podcast here early morning. So interesting and numbers. The numbers are skyrocketing for the PhD Dynasty podcast. All right, we will let you all go, but enjoy the week of football, and then we will see if we can get Tibbs' comment in the near future here. So thanks again for watching, and see you later.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.